You ever notice how you can want something with your whole heart and still be the one who destroys it? That's the insanity of being human. We are creatures capable of greatness, yet somehow we keep plotting against ourselves. This is the quiet theater of self-sabotage, where the villain and the victim wear the same face. You know the pattern. The job interview you prepared for, then decided not to show up because you felt better candidates would outshine you. The relationship that finally felt safe, until you pushed it away, convinced it was too good to be true, and you were only protecting yourself from future heartbreak. The dream you buried, not because the world rejected you, but because a voice inside whispered, "Who are you to want this?" But here's the truth most people never hear. Self-sabotage doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like protection. It disguises itself as realism, humility, caution, even honesty. Your mind, trying to shield you from pain, becomes the very architect of your suffering. This isn't weakness. This isn't laziness. It's a survival mechanism that kept you safe once, but now it's running your life from the shadows. So the real question isn't, do I self-sabotage? We all do. But for some people it has become a pattern, a way of life. The real question is, why are we so loyal to patterns that destroy us? And how do we finally break free from them? Before we go deeper, there's something you need to know. Something most people sense in themselves but can never quite articulate. There is a part of your mind that has been shaping your life from the shadows. Not the conscious part you negotiate with, but a quieter intelligence beneath it. Old, protective, and terrified of letting you grow beyond what it understands. Truth is, the psyche clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is hurting us. It would rather preserve an old story than risk the uncertainty of becoming someone new. And that is the invisible battle you've been fighting without realizing it. It's this hidden part that decides when you pull back, when you forget, when you lose momentum the moment things begin to work. And unless you learn how it operates, you will keep mistaking its fear for your own failure. In this video, I'm going to help you see that hidden mechanism with a clarity most people never experience. Not to fix you, not to motivate you, but to finally reveal the psychological pattern that has been controlling your actions and shaping your life choices. What you're about to understand is simple, but it changes everything. Your self-sabotage has a logic your subconscious chooses not to recognize, so that it feels like your choices are entirely yours and purely made from reasonable thinking. A comfortable lie we tell ourselves while we quietly dismantle the very things we want. And once you begin to notice that logic, even faintly, you realize something startling. It doesn't reveal itself honestly. Self-sabotage rarely admits the presence of fear. It never says, "I'm protecting you." Instead, it hides. It shapeshifts. It wears masks so familiar you never question them. Self-sabotage wears many disguises. It never walks into your life announcing itself. It shows up dressed as something reasonable, even noble. It looks like procrastination, but beneath it is the terror of not being good enough. A quiet dread that if you actually begin, you might confirm your deepest suspicion about yourself. It looks like perfectionism, but beneath it is the fear of being seen as ordinary. A belief that your worth rests entirely on flawless execution, and anything less is humiliation. It looks like overthinking, but beneath it is the fear of making the wrong choice, as if hesitation could protect you from the consequences of being human. It looks like staying busy, but beneath it is the fear of slowing down long enough to feel the grief, the disappointment, the unmet needs you've buried for years. Sometimes it appears as chronic indecision, as if you're waiting for the universe to give you permission to move, because choosing means taking responsibility, and responsibility means risking regret. Sometimes it appears as choosing partners who cannot love you, not because you don't crave connection, but because healthy love threatens to expose the parts of you you've convinced yourself are unlovable. Receiving love feels far more dangerous than repeating the pain you already understand. And sometimes it's the sudden loss of motivation, the moment things start going well. Because success can feel like an identity crisis. If your whole sense of self has been built around struggle, ask yourself this question. Who are you when life finally stops fighting you? Notice this. All of these behaviors feel like self-protection. They feel rational, sensible, even wise. But they're not protecting you from the world. They're protecting you from the parts of your past you still haven't faced. From the old memories, the unhealed stories, the forgotten vows you made with yourself in moments of pain. From the fear that if you truly try and fail, the illusion of safety will vanish. Self-sabotage is the bodyguard of your deepest wounds. It shields you by limiting you. It comforts you by shrinking you. It preserves you by preventing you from becoming who you were meant to be. And the tragedy is this: it doesn't do it to ruin your life. It does it because somewhere, long ago, your mind learned that survival and expansion could not coexist. So it continued choosing survival, even long after the danger was gone. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Jeremy spent 3 years building his bakery. 3 years of 4 a.m. mornings, flour-dusted aprons, and slowly growing confidence. He was good at what he did. His customers told him so constantly, lining up before dawn for his sourdough and pastries. But he kept his prices barely above cost, gave away extras to anyone who asked, and never quite pushed for the growth everyone said was inevitable. Then one day, a big opportunity knocked. Everything could change. A group of investors reached out. They'd been watching his business. They saw the lines, the loyalty, the quality. They wanted to fund a major expansion. 3 new locations, a commercial kitchen, distribution to grocery stores across the state. The kind of opportunity that could turn a small neighborhood bakery into a regional brand. He had 1 week to review the proposal and give them an answer. And do you know what happened? He didn't respond. Not because the deal was bad. Not because he didn't understand it. He read through that proposal dozens of times. He ran the numbers. He saw how it could work. His accountant called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. His wife could barely contain her excitement. But every time he sat down to call them back, something stopped him. A tightness in his chest. A voice that said, "This is how you lose everything." Another that whispered, "Stay small, stay safe." So he let the deadline pass. And when they followed up, confused, he told them he'd decided to keep things local and wasn't ready to scale yet. The words sounded humble, principled even. But the truth was something far deeper. Afterward, he felt relief, then regret, then a quiet resignation that maybe he was just meant to stay small. But truth is, Jeremy has always wanted to expand his business way more than what it is now. But consider what was really happening beneath the surface, the part Jeremy couldn't see. When he was 12 years old, his father owned a bakery too. A successful one. People loved it. And then his father expanded. 2 new locations, a catering arm, big ambitions. But he expanded too fast, lost control of quality, couldn't manage the staff. The debt piled up. Within 18 months, all 3 locations closed. Jeremy watched his father unravel, watched him become a shell of himself, watched the shame eat away at him for years. And somewhere deep in his young mind, a conclusion formed, one he never spoke aloud, one he didn't even know he'd made. Staying small keeps you safe. Getting big destroys you. So decades later, when the investors offered him an expansion opportunity, his nervous system screamed danger. Not because the deal was bad, not because he lacked the skill, but because to that 12-year-old inside him, expansion wasn't an opportunity. It was the beginning of the end. Self-sabotage wasn't punishing him. It was trying to save him from repeating his father's tragedy. This is the invisible equation that runs beneath most self-sabotage. Past pain plus present opportunity equals unconscious alarm. And when that alarm rings, you don't hear it as fear. You hear it as doubt, as fatigue, as "I'm not ready yet," as 100 rational-sounding reasons why now isn't the right time. But the real reason is simpler and far more heartbreaking. A part of you is still protecting a younger version of yourself who once needed that protection desperately. Jeremy's story isn't an anomaly. It's a pattern. A template your mind runs whenever an opportunity threatens an old wound. Every time you pull back from something good, it's not random. It's not just bad timing or poor discipline. Something older than your goals is deciding for you, quietly, convincingly, and without your permission. Jeremy's bakery was a single instance of a universal rule. When the present offers growth, the past can sound like a forecast of doom. If you've ever stopped yourself at the edge of possibility, that pause you felt, that's the same alarm bell ringing for you. Let me ask you something. How many times have you walked away from something you claimed you wanted, not because it wasn't right, but because it felt too right? How many times did you call it bad timing, or not ready, or I need to think, when the truth was simpler? A part of you panicked at the possibility of becoming someone you have never been. Think about the last opportunity you delayed until it died. The relationship you kept testing until it broke. The project you only worked on when nobody could see your progress. You tell the world you're aiming for growth, yet your actions keep circling the same safe, familiar suffering. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because your mind learned, a long time ago, that good things are dangerous, and disappointment is clothed in hope. And until you see this clearly, you will call it fate, you will call it intuition, you will call it not the right moment, when really, it's self-sabotage whispering in your own voice. But let's go deeper, because Jeremy's story is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Self-sabotage doesn't start the day you walk away from an opportunity. It starts years earlier, in the quiet moments when you were learning what it meant to be loved. Most people don't remember the exact moment they decided they weren't enough. But the decision was made. Maybe you were 5 years old, bringing home a drawing from school, proud, eager, alive with the hope of being seen. And your parent glanced at it for half a second before returning to their phone. Or worse, they smiled and said, "That's nice, honey," in a tone that told you they weren't really looking. Or maybe you were 8, and you heard the praise your sibling received for their grades, their talent, their ease at being exactly what your parents wanted. And you learned, without anyone saying it directly, love isn't given freely, it's earned. And you're still trying to figure out the price you have to pay to earn people's love. Or maybe you were 12, and you made a mistake, forgot something, broke something, disappointed someone, and the coldness that followed taught you that love could be withdrawn as punishment. That you were only safe when you were perfect. That your worth was something you had to prove, again and again, and even then it might not be enough. This is what happens when love becomes conditional. You stop believing you deserve good things simply for existing. You start performing, achieving, accommodating, shrinking yourself to fit the shape of someone else's approval. And when something good finally comes your way, something you didn't have to earn, something that's offered freely, your nervous system doesn't recognize it. It feels wrong, dangerous, too easy. So you sabotage it. Not because you don't want it, but because you've never learned to trust anything you didn't have to fight for. And then there's betrayal. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, though that happens too, but the quieter kind. The person who promised they'd never leave, and then did. The friend who shared your secrets. The partner who chose someone else after you'd given them everything. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It rewires your brain. It teaches you that vulnerability is a trap. That opening yourself to someone is an invitation to be destroyed. That the safest way to live is to never need anyone fully. So you start relationships already planning the exit. You pick people who can't truly see you, because if they can't see you, they can't reject the real you. You keep one foot out the door, always. You test people until they prove you right, that everyone leaves eventually. And when someone good comes along, someone patient, someone steady, someone who actually wants to stay, you panic. Because your mind has learned, the more you care, the more it will hurt when it ends. So you end it first. You pick a fight. You withdraw. You create the very outcome you feared, because at least this time, you controlled it. This isn't cruelty. This is survival. And there's a final piece most people never see. At some point, you became someone you thought you needed to be to survive. The overachiever, the people pleaser, the one who never needs help, the one who's always fine. You built an identity around your wounds, a version of yourself designed to prevent the pain from ever happening again. And it worked, for a while. But now, years later, that identity has become a cage. Because the version of you that survives is not the same version that thrives. The part of you that learned to stay small can't imagine taking up space. The part that learned to perform can't imagine resting. The part that learned to hide can't imagine being fully seen. And so when life offers you an opportunity to step into a bigger, truer version of yourself, a version that doesn't need to perform, or hide, or earn love, it feels like annihilation. Not because you'll fail, but because you'll have to let go of the person you've been pretending to be. And that person, however painful to maintain, is familiar, known, safe. This is why self-sabotage feels so automatic. This is why you can see it happening and still not stop it. It's not a character flaw. It's not laziness or weakness or lack of willpower. It's your mind running an old program, written in childhood, reinforced by pain, and perfected over decades, designed to keep you alive in a world that once felt dangerous. But the truth most people can't bear to face: the danger never fully goes away. You can expand your business and lose everything. You can open your heart again and get betrayed. You can step into your potential and fail publicly. The world is still uncertain, still capable of breaking you. But here's what changes. The old strategy, staying small, hiding, protecting, doesn't actually keep you safe. It just keeps you half alive. The choice isn't between safety and risk. It's between slow suffocation and living fully, knowing you might get hurt. And the version of you that heals isn't the one who believes nothing bad will ever happen again. It's the one who says, I know I might fail. I know I might get hurt. But I'd rather risk the pain of trying than guarantee the pain of never becoming who I'm meant to be. That's not recklessness. That's courage. And it's the only way out. Let me tell you the story of Maya. She is a single, hard-working woman in her early 40s. If you asked anyone who knew Maya to describe her, they'd use words like strong, independent, selective. They'd say she has high standards, that she knows what she wants, that she's just waiting for the right person. But the truth is quieter and far more painful. Maya isn't waiting, she's hiding. It started 15 years ago. She was 25, in love for the first time in a way that felt real. Not the shallow infatuations of her teenage years and early 20s, but something deeper, something she thought was mutual. Augustine, her lover, was a 30-year-old man who played the perfect lover for 8 good months. They talked about marriage, about building a life together. She let herself imagine it, the home, the partnership, the safety of being fully known and fully chosen. And then one day, without warning, he disappeared. She searched for him. She called, but he wouldn't answer her calls nor return them. She sent emails, reached out to family, but Augustine was nowhere to be found. Days passed, months and years went by, and she stayed broken, not knowing what became of him. Why would he leave suddenly without a word? So many questions Maya couldn't answer. 3 years later, Maya was promoted in her workplace. The company wanted her to become a branch manager in a new branch in Nevada, so she had to relocate. She was happy, excited. Work had become the only thing that kept her going. She couldn't heal from the heartbreak, and she could not move on because she was still searching for answers. Everything had seemed perfect. So, what went wrong? Why did he decide to ghost her like that? The company had made accommodation arrangements with a realtor. All Maya had to do was show up with her things and move in. She hoped life in Nevada would help her forget about the agonizing 3 years, living in the shadow of a relationship that vanished into oblivion. It's Monday, the first day of her life as a branch manager in Nevada. She is all set for work, and as she steps out from her apartment to the parking lot, guess who's there? Augustine with a woman and young child. So while Maya was suffering and heartbroken, Augustine was raising a family with someone he'd chosen instead of her. Maya is stunned. Her heart pounds, her blood pressure rises, and the rest is history. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was the realization that while she'd been building a future in her mind, he'd been deciding she wasn't enough. And worse, she hadn't seen it coming. She'd trusted him completely, and that trust had made her a fool. So she made a silent vow, one she didn't even realize she was making. Never again. In the years that followed, 3 men tried to love her. Not casually, not halfway, but fully, patiently, with the kind of devotion most people spend their lives searching for. The first was a teacher, gentle, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembered the small things she mentioned in passing, her favorite flower, the book she wanted to read, the way she took her coffee. He told her, 6 months in, that he could see a future with her. And something inside her recoiled. She started picking fights, finding flaws, pulling away whenever he got too close. She told herself he was too soft, that she needed someone stronger. But the truth was simpler. His consistency terrified her, because if she let herself rely on it, what would happen when it disappeared? So she ended it, and told herself it was the right choice. The second was different, confident, successful, the kind of man who seemed unshakable. He pursued her with intention, made it clear he wasn't playing games. He introduced her to his family, talked openly about wanting a partnership, not just a relationship, and she let herself try. For a while. But the closer they got, the louder the voice in her head became. He doesn't really see you. He sees the version of you you're performing. So she started testing him, withdrawing to see if he'd chase, creating distance to see if he'd fight for her, waiting for him to prove what she already believed, that his love was conditional. Eventually, exhausted, he asked her what she wanted, and she realized she didn't know how to answer, because what she wanted and what she could allow herself to have were 2 different things. He left. Not angry, just tired. And she told herself she'd dodged a bullet. The third was the hardest, because he saw through her. He saw the fear beneath the independence, the loneliness beneath the strength, the longing beneath the deflection. And he stayed anyway. For a year he stayed. Through her pulling away, her testing, her sabotage. He told her gently that he knew she was scared, that he wasn't going anywhere. And that was the problem. Because his refusal to leave forced her to confront the real question. If he's not going to abandon you, then what's the excuse? She didn't have one. So she created chaos. She picked a fight so big, so cutting, that he finally had no choice but to walk away. And when he did, she felt 2 things simultaneously: relief and the deepest regret she'd ever known. That was 3 years ago. Since then, she hasn't dated. Not because she doesn't want to, but because she's convinced herself that what she wants doesn't exist. Or worse, that it exists, but not for her. She tells herself she's fine, that she's learned to be happy alone, that she doesn't need anyone. But then she sits with her married friends. She watches the way they talk about their partners, not perfectly, but honestly. The way they navigate conflict without catastrophe. The way they've built something steady, something real. And she feels it. The void. The ache of a life half-lived. She wants what they have. She knows she wants it. But when someone shows interest, when a man at a coffee shop strikes up a conversation, when a colleague asks her to dinner, she freezes. Her mind floods with reasons. It won't work. I don't have time. I'm not ready. He's probably not serious anyway. And she stays in the shadows. Not because that's where she wants to be, but because stepping into the light means risking the pain all over again. The truth beneath the surface. Maya's first heartbreak didn't just break her heart. It broke her belief that love could be safe. And in the aftermath, she made a deal with herself. If I never fully trust again, I can never be blindsided again. But that protection came with a price. She didn't just guard her heart from bad men, she guarded it from good ones too. The teacher, the businessman, the one who saw her, none of them failed her. She failed herself. Because somewhere deep inside, she'd internalized a belief she didn't even know she carried. If someone loves me, it's only a matter of time before they see I'm not worth it. This is conditional love at its cruelest. Maya didn't just learn that love could be taken away, she learned that she was the reason it would be. So when men showed up with real love, steady, patient, committed, it didn't feel like the answer. It felt like a test she was bound to fail. And rather than wait for them to discover she wasn't enough, she proved it herself. She pushed them away first. She controlled the ending. And now, she's alone. Not because she chose independence, but because she chose the pain she knew over the love she didn't trust. This is the cruelest form of self-sabotage, not the dramatic kind, where you blow up your life in a single moment, but the quiet kind, where, year after year, you choose smallness over risk, where you live in the shadow of what could have been, where you convince yourself you're protecting yourself, while slowly suffocating the part of you that still wants to be loved. And the tragedy is this: Maya isn't broken. She's not unlovable. She's not damaged beyond repair. She's just terrified. And until she learns to see her fear for what it is, not wisdom, not intuition, not realism, but an outdated survival mechanism that's now running her life, she'll keep choosing loneliness. Not because it's what she wants, but because it's the only thing that feels safe. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in these stories, in Jeremy's hesitation, in Maya's retreat, in the patterns you've been running for years, I need you to hear something. You are not broken. You're not weak or damaged or incapable of change. You're not doomed to repeat these cycles forever. But there's a part most people don't want to hear. You also can't think your way out of this. You can't read another book, watch another video, or have one more conversation with a friend where you dissect your patterns and promise yourself this time will be different. Because self-sabotage doesn't live in your conscious mind. It lives deeper, in the part of you that decided, long ago, how the world works. In the neural pathways that fire before you even realize you're afraid. In the body that tenses before your mind understands why. And that part of you doesn't respond to logic. It doesn't care about your goals, your vision boards, or your 5-year plan. It only cares about one thing: keeping you alive. And to that part of you, growth feels like danger. Self-sabotage isn't something you overcome through willpower. It's something you rewire through awareness. Not the shallow kind of awareness where you say, "Oh, I self-sabotage sometimes," but the kind where you catch it happening in real time, where you feel the fear rising, recognize the old pattern activating, and choose differently anyway. Not because you've eliminated the fear, but because you've learned to see it clearly enough that it no longer controls you. This isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming undeceived. It's about learning to recognize when your mind is protecting you from a danger that no longer exists, and choosing, consciously, to move forward anyway. Not recklessly, not naively, but with full knowledge that staying small is its own form of suffering. What I'm about to share with you isn't a quick fix. It's not a hack or a mantra or a single realization that changes everything overnight. It's a process, a way of seeing yourself that, once you begin, changes how you move through the world. There are 3 stages to breaking free from self-sabotage. First, recognition. You have to learn to see the pattern clearly, not just intellectually, but in the moment it's happening. You have to catch yourself mid-sabotage and name it for what it is. Second, interruption. Once you see it, you have to learn to pause, to create space between the trigger and the response, to stop the automatic reaction before it takes over. Third, rewiring. And then, in that pause, you have to choose a different action. Not the old one that feels safe, but a new one that aligns with who you're trying to become. Do this enough times, and the pattern weakens. The old neural pathway fades, and a new one takes its place. This is how you stop being controlled by your past, not by erasing it, but by learning to respond to it differently. Let me show you how this works in practice. Step 1. Recognition. The first step is learning to see the pattern while it's happening. Not afterward, when you're lying in bed replaying the day and thinking, "Why did I do that again?" But in the moment, when your hand is reaching for the self-destruct button and you catch yourself mid-reach. This is harder than it sounds, because self-sabotage doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a notification that says, "Hey, you're about to ruin something good because you're afraid." It shows up disguised as reason, as caution, as sudden exhaustion or doubt, or 100 rational-sounding excuses. So the first skill you need to develop is pattern recognition, the ability to notice when your old programming is running the show. Start here. Pay attention to the physical sensations that precede your sabotage. Your body knows before your mind does. When Maya was with the third man, the one who stayed, the one who saw through her, there was a moment, just before she picked the final fight, where she felt it. A tightness in her chest, a sudden urge to move, to leave, to create distance. A flood of thoughts that all pointed to one conclusion. Get out. That wasn't intuition. That was panic. And if she'd been trained to recognize it, if she'd known that her nervous system was sounding a false alarm, she might have paused. So practice this. The next time you're about to walk away from something good, or delay something important, or pick a fight you don't really want to have, stop. Ask yourself, what does my body feel like right now? Is your chest tight? Is your stomach clenched? Are your thoughts racing? Do you suddenly feel the need to escape, to shut down, to create distance? If yes, that's your signal. That's the moment your old pattern is activating. And the simple act of noticing it, of naming it, this is fear, not wisdom, begins to weaken its grip. Because self-sabotage only works when you believe it's you making the choice. The moment you see it as a pattern, as something happening to you, not by you, you create the first crack in its armor. Recognition isn't about stopping the feeling. It's about seeing it clearly enough that it can no longer deceive you. And that's when the real shift begins. Step 2. Recognition shows you the pattern, but seeing it isn't enough. Because even when you know what's happening, even when you catch yourself mid-sabotage and think, here I go again, the momentum can still pull you forward. The fight still gets picked. The opportunity still gets ignored. The person still gets pushed away. Why? Because your nervous system is faster than your thinking mind. By the time you've recognized the pattern, your body has already started executing the old program. Tightness becomes withdrawal. Panic becomes aggression. Fear becomes avoidance. And before you know it, you've acted. This is where interruption comes in. Interruption is the practice of creating a pause, a gap between the moment you recognize the pattern and the moment you would normally react. It's not about suppressing the feeling. It's not about pretending you're not afraid. It's about stopping the automatic response long enough to choose a different one. Practice the 5-second pause. When you feel the old pattern activating, when your chest tightens, when the urge to flee or fight or freeze rises up, count to 5. Out loud if you can, silently if you must. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. 5 seconds where you do nothing, where you don't text back in anger, where you don't make the decision to leave, where you don't shut down the conversation. You just pause. And in that pause, something extraordinary happens. The intensity starts to fade. Not completely, not immediately, but enough that you realize, this feeling won't kill me. The urge to sabotage is just that, an urge. It's not a command. It's not the truth. It's just an old reaction your nervous system learned a long time ago. And you don't have to obey it. Imagine Maya with the third man, the one who saw her, who stayed. She's sitting across from him. He's just told her again that he loves her, that he's not going anywhere. And she feels it rising, the need to push him away, to say something cutting, to create distance. In the past, she would have acted immediately. The words would have been out of her mouth before she even knew what she was saying. But this time, she recognizes it. This is fear, not wisdom. And instead of speaking, she pauses. She counts to 5. She feels her chest tighten, feels the words forming, feels the old pattern screaming at her to protect herself. But she doesn't move. She breathes. And by the time she reaches 5, something has shifted. The urgency has softened. She can still feel the fear, but it no longer controls her. She has a choice. This is the power of interruption. It doesn't erase the fear. It doesn't make the pattern disappear. But it gives you back your agency. It creates space for you to ask, What would I do if I weren't afraid? And in that space, a new possibility emerges. You can still sabotage if you want to, but now it's a choice, not an inevitability. And that shifts everything. Step 3. Rewiring. Recognition shows you the pattern. Interruption gives you the pause, but the pause itself isn't the transformation. The transformation happens when you use that pause to choose a different action. Not just once, but again and again, until the new action becomes as automatic as the old one. This is rewiring, and it's based on a simple truth about how your brain works. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Every time you self-sabotage, you reinforce the old pathway. Every time you choose differently, you build a new one. At first, the new pathway is weak, unfamiliar. It takes effort. The old pathway is strong, automatic. It feels like the only option. But the more you choose the new action, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels wrong, the stronger that pathway becomes. And over time, the old one fades. Not because you've erased it, but because you've stopped feeding it. So practice this in the pause. After you've counted to 5, after the intensity has softened and you've created space, ask yourself one question. What would the version of me I'm trying to become do right now? Not the version who's afraid, not the version who's protecting old wounds, but the version who's choosing growth over safety, who's willing to risk being hurt if it means living fully, who knows that staying small is its own form of suffering. What would that person do? And then, this is the crucial part. Do the smallest possible version of that action. Not the grand gesture, not the complete transformation, just the next right micro step. Maya is sitting across from the third man. She's recognized the fear. She's paused. She's counted to 5. And now she's in the gap. The old version of her would pick a fight, push him away, end it before he can leave her. But she asks herself, what would the version of me who's capable of receiving love do right now? The answer is simple. Stay. Not declare her undying love. Not make promises she's not ready for. Not pretend the fear isn't there. Just stay in the conversation. Stay present. Stay open. So instead of lashing out, she says something true. I'm scared. 3 words. That's it. Not a big speech. Not a full confession. Just an honest acknowledgement of what she's feeling. And in that moment, something shifts. Because she didn't run. She didn't sabotage. She chose vulnerability over protection. And the man across from her? He doesn't leave. He doesn't judge her. He just nods and says, I know. I'm here anyway. This is rewiring. It's not about becoming a different person overnight. It's about making a different choice in a single moment, and then making that choice again the next time the pattern activates. And again, and again. Each time you choose differently, you're teaching your nervous system. This new way is safe too, maybe even safer. Each time, the fear loses a little of its power. Each time, the new pathway gets a little stronger. And eventually, not immediately but eventually, the new response becomes automatic. Not because you've stopped being afraid, but because you've learned that you can feel the fear and move forward anyway. Over time, this is what it looks like. Jeremy, standing at the edge of expansion, feeling his father's failure echoing in his chest, he recognizes it. He pauses, and instead of letting the deadline pass, he calls the investors back and says, I'm interested, but I need to do this carefully. Not a full yes, but not a fearful no. A new choice, a middle path. Maya, months later, when a new man asks her to dinner, she recognizes the fear. She pauses, and instead of making an excuse, she says, yes, but I need to take things slow. Not pretending she's fearless, but not hiding either. A new choice, a small step forward. Do this enough times, and something remarkable happens. You stop being controlled by your past. Not because the past disappears, not because the wounds magically heal, but because you've learned to respond to them differently. You've built a new identity, not through willpower or forced positivity, but through multiple small, brave choices that add up over time. This is how you break free from self-sabotage, not by understanding it, not by wanting it to stop, but by recognizing it, interrupting it, and rewiring it. One moment, one choice, one new action at a time, until the version of you who sabotaged becomes the version of you who grows. So here's where we are. You started this video understanding, on some level, that you get in your own way. But now you see it differently. You see that self-sabotage isn't a character flaw. It's not laziness or weakness or some fatal defect in your personality. It's a survival mechanism, one that kept you safe once, but now keeps you small. You see that it has a logic, a pattern, a predictable sequence that runs beneath your conscious awareness, shaping your choices before you even realize you're choosing. And most importantly, you see that it's not inevitable. You're not doomed to repeat the same cycles forever. You're not trapped by your past. You're not destined to push away every good thing that comes your way. But here's the part that matters most. Seeing it isn't enough. You can watch this video, you can nod along, you can recognize yourself in Jeremy's hesitation or Maya's retreat. But none of it matters if you don't do anything with it. Because self-sabotage is counting on you to do exactly what you've always done. Understand the problem intellectually, and then change nothing. It's betting that you'll watch this, feel inspired for a moment, and then go back to the same patterns tomorrow. Don't give it that victory. The next time you feel it rising, the tightness in your chest, the sudden urge to flee, the flood of rational-sounding excuses, recognize it. Say to yourself, even silently, "This is fear, not wisdom." Pause, count to 5, breathe. Let the intensity soften, and then ask, what would the version of me I'm trying to become do right now? And do the smallest version of that. Not the grand gesture, not the complete transformation, just the next right step. Stay in the conversation you'd normally leave. Send the email you'd normally delay. Say yes to the opportunity you'd normally rationalize away. One small, brave choice, and then another, and another. Because that's how you rewire a lifetime of conditioning, not through one dramatic moment of change, but through multiple small acts of courage that, over time, add up to a completely different life. You are not your patterns. You are not the sum of your past wounds, your old fears, or the survival strategies you learned when you were too young to know better. You are the person who can see those patterns clearly and choose differently anyway. That's not optimism. That's not pretending the danger isn't real. That's the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming whole, of reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried to stay safe, of letting yourself want things fully, even knowing you might not get them, of stepping into the light, even though it means being seen, really seen, flaws and all. This is the path of individuation, of returning to your real self, not the self you constructed to survive, but the self you were always meant to be. So the question isn't, will I ever stop self-sabotaging? The question is, what am I willing to do differently the next time the pattern activates? Because it will activate. The fear will return. The old alarm will ring. But now you know what it is, and that transforms everything. You've spent long enough being loyal to patterns that hurt you. Now it's time to be loyal to the person you're becoming. Not someday. Not when you're ready. Not when it feels safe. Now. In the next moment the pattern shows up. Recognize it. Interrupt it. Rewire it. And watch what happens when you finally stop fighting yourself and start fighting for yourself instead. If this video helped you see something in yourself you couldn't see before, if you recognized your own patterns in these stories, then there's more waiting for you. This video is part of a collection I call the Self-Archive. It's a series dedicated to one thing, helping you return to who you really are. Not the person you've had to be to survive. Not the version you constructed to fit in, to be loved, to stay safe. But the person beneath all of that. The one you've been carrying all along, waiting for permission to emerge. The Self-Archive explores the hidden psychological patterns that shape your life. The ones you've been living with for so long you stopped questioning them. Each video is designed to do what this one did. Reveal the mechanism. Help you see it clearly. Give you a way forward. It's not about fixing you. You were never broken. It's about unbecoming everything you had to become to survive, so you can finally meet yourself as you are. If you're ready to go deeper, If you're serious about breaking free from the cycles that have been running your life, the Self-Archive playlist is linked below. Explore it. Start with whatever calls to you. Because self-awareness isn't a destination, it's a practice. And every pattern you recognize, every choice you make differently, is another step toward becoming whole. I'll see you in the next one.